You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
PackersTalk.com.
You're listening to No Huddle Radio on the Packers Talk Radio Network, your home for in-depth and thoughtful Packers analysis. I'm your host, Gil Martin. My co-host is my good friend, Sean Tehan. In addition to this show, I write for the PackersPost.com and Cheesehead TV, and Sean was a TV sportscaster in Minnesota. We're here to talk Packers because you're all here for one thing, and that's a love for Green Bay football. Sean, we have reached the bye week. Can you believe it?
Yeah. It's bye week time. Perfect time for a bye week, right? And pretty much the middle of the season. And it's weird, Gil. Hey, we got our music back too, just in time for the bye week. But hey, Packers obviously not playing this weekend, but coming up later in the season. A few words about our sponsor, Wisconsin's own Ticket King. For over 30 years, Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets to Packer fans. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. For direct links to specific Packer game tickets, go to PackersTalk.com/tickets or browse their website at theticketking.com. And if you're following along with us on YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're at today, if you're following along with us live, thank you for tuning in. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Feel free to comment throughout the show and any questions that you may want answered or anything you want to comment on. If you want to give also comments to Gil and I on our good looks, on our natural good looks, you can do that as well. We're always flattered, and we're always taking more compliments, Gil.
And so modest about it too. That's the thing.
Yeah, we're humble too.
Yes.
That is the big thing.
But well, we're also right past the halfway mark of the season, which is also hard to believe. I feel like we blinked and we got into November already.
And hey, they're 6-3 right now. They were 3-6 a year ago at this point. This is a positive. The Packers have definitely taken a step forward since last year. Now you got to finish the season. We still got a lot of ball game left. But, Gil, the NFL trade deadline came and went. The Packers surprisingly didn't trade for anyone, but they traded away kind of a cornerstone for the last few years. Preston Smith was traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers for a 2025 seventh-round pick. Appeared to be a bit of a money-saving move for Green Bay, and also Preston told the Pittsburgh media on Wednesday he requested the Packers to trade him a few weeks ago. He's struggled a bit in the new defensive system, only 2.5 sacks in 9 games this year. Played 5.5 seasons, though, with the Packers after he was signed by the Packers in the first few days of free agency in 2019. 44 sacks during those 5.5 seasons. Missed only 1 game during that time, too. So a very durable guy. Per Ken Ingalls, he's a good follow on Twitter for Packer Cat News. The trade created just over $2 million in cap space this year, more than $7.5 million next year, more than $18 million in 2026, and about $1.5 million in 2027. So there's a lot of wiggle room for the Packers. It's kind of a win-win for both sides. Preston Smith moves on. He moves back to a 3-4 defensive system where he really has thrived throughout most of his career. And the Packers get a look at their younger edge rushers.
Yeah, and that's sort of the crux of this from a Packer standpoint because, we've talked about, Green Bay 6-3. They want to be Super Bowl contenders, and they'll need a strong finish to get there. Trading away one of your veteran leaders and a guy who has been a consistent performer for this team since 2019, not usually what teams that are going all in for the Super Bowl tend to do, and yet it did make sense. You save a lot of cap space. You don't want to have a guy there who's unhappy with the defense. I get it. Preston Smith, he's been playing this game professionally for a long time. He's been a very solid Green Bay Packer since he got here, and I certainly wish him well. Now the key is Lucas Van Ness, Kingsley Enagbare, Aaron Mosby, Brenton Cox. Who steps up and takes the majority of those snaps and hopefully adds a little productivity because the edge rush has not been consistent this year.
No, it has not. It's just, and the edge rush in a 4-3, you don't have 5 guys going after the passer or 5 guys on the line of scrimmage. You only have 4. So you got to win those one-on-one battles, and the Packer DNs, the edges just haven't been able to really do that this year. And Preston, it was time to move on for sure. It just business, like you said, Gil, business-wise, it made a ton of sense for the Packers with a young group that they probably want to get some eyes on a little more. It made a lot of sense. He really wasn't flourishing in this new system. And And hey, I give credit to the guy where he still played, even though he wanted to be moved. And we don't know. It could have been a situation where it was rumored a few weeks ago that the Packers were shopping Preston Smith. I don't know. You never know. You never know. Yeah, we're not flies on the wall in Brian Gutekunst's office. We don't know if they were shopping him or they were just getting calls about Preston Smith.
Right.
But maybe it's just a situation where Preston Smith knew that the writing was on the wall, that this was probably going to be his final year. So he just asked to be traded just to get out sooner rather than later. And it just makes a lot of sense all around. I'm all good with it. Where it's kind of crazy, though, going back to 2019 when they signed him and Zadarius Smith, the Smith bros. And Zadarius looked to be the guy who was going to be the long-term edge rusher in Green Bay. Well, he was there for 3 years. He wanted more money. He got out. And he's kind of bounced around the league. Now he's with the Detroit Lions, ironically. And Preston Smith was just that steady force in the locker room, that steady force on the defensive line. It just really was a great signing by Brian Gutekunst in 2019.
It was, and this is the last of that free agent class now. They've all departed since. And I will say this. I give credit to Preston Smith and to the Packers front office.
Yeah.
Because even though you did hear, they may be shopping him, at no point publicly did Preston Smith say, I need out of here. I'm not happy here. Get me out of here. The front office didn't disparage him. He didn't disparage the front office. They handled it behind closed doors. The team accommodated him. I hope Preston Smith does well in Pittsburgh, and I hope that the Packers are able to fill the void left by his departure. But I think this was a win-win, really, for both sides.
It was just so professional all around. And you compare it to Zadarius Smith a few years ago when he needed back surgery all of a sudden because that could have been tied to the new contract. He wanted a new contract before having back surgery, which he probably should have had right after his second year in Green Bay. And there was obviously a lot of issues with Zadarius Smith and with the Packers in general. But Preston was all professional. Preston the professional. I mean, that's just the way it was, and it's just really good. He did not become a distraction. Clearly on the outside, he's a team first guy. He's always been a team first guy. That's why he's been in the NFL for as long as he's been. 10th year in the league, and it's a good spot in Pittsburgh where he's going to be behind T.J. Watt. He's going to be behind Alex Highsmith. He's going to be in that edge rusher, outside linebacker rotation in Pittsburgh. Just a really good fit for Preston. But for the Packers, obviously the Preston Smith trade, it opens up a roster spot on the 53-man roster. Gil, what makes sense? Who's going to fill Preston's roster spot on the 53?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And there's a couple of variables. You may end up getting Marshawn Lloyd back, and he steps into that roster spot. It doesn't necessarily have to be an edge rusher filling that spot. I mean, I think there are guys already on the roster who are going to get more playing time as a result. To me, what we're going to see, more of Aaron Mosby and Brenton Cox Jr. will probably be active on most game days as opposed to being one of the extra guys.
In the last couple of years, I'm excited. I want to see Brenton Cox Jr. get on the field because the last couple of years, we've seen that guy really play well in the preseason, really play well. He has never been active for one NFL game. He has not been active for one NFL game so far in his early NFL career. And I'm excited to see him get on the field. Aaron Mosby, he was on the sack party on Sunday, the one team sack for the Packers on Sunday. Aaron Mosby was a big part of it. Now it helped that Penei Sewell tripped over his own right guard's foot, but hey, you got to get him when you can get him, right? And with that, Marshawn Lloyd makes a ton of sense. Brian Gutekunst, he talked to the media on Tuesday, said that he's getting closer to a return. You also have Luke Musgrave, who's on the injured reserve list, and a guy who may return before the end of the season, but I would think he would take John Fitzpatrick's spot when he's ready to come back. But Marshawn Lloyd, that's the thing is, Marshawn Lloyd makes a lot of sense to be that final guy in the 53-man roster to take that Preston Smith spot. It's because Chris Brooks has played really well since they signed him earlier in the year when they put Marshawn Lloyd in the IR. Emmanuel Wilson has played well. Josh Jacobs is obviously Josh Jacobs. We'll talk about him in just a bit. So Marshawn Lloyd, the Packers, I'm comfortable with them keeping 4 running backs because of how solid that group has been. But another guy who could be an under-the-radar addition to the 53-man roster, but in-house, is Jamin Davis, who's on the Packers practice squad right now. This guy was a first-round pick with the Washington Commanders a few years ago. He was released by the Commanders during this season, only 13 total tackles this year. He registered more than 75 tackles and at least a sack in his first 3 years in the NFL. and a guy who's obviously underperformed. That's why the Commanders decided to move on from him. But who knows with that inside linebacker room, if they want to get a new look, maybe Jamin Davis is a guy they bring up to the 53 as well.
Very possible. And it's good that they have options. There are different guys who are on the practice squad, who have shown flashes, who have looked good. And, it also, could depend on who's healthy going into this coming week.
Yeah, it very well could. Another one that could be a potential low-risk, high-reward player is that the Ravens let go of veteran defensive end Yannick Ngakoue on Thursday. He has bounced around the league quite a bit the last few years, but the guy has more than 70 sacks in his career in the NFL. There's a reason he's bounced around the league, though. He's kind of been underperforming the last few years, but if they want to just take a flyer on a guy, on a veteran like that, that may not be a bad idea to use that final spot as well. But hey, that's Brian Gutekunst's job. Not our job. It's Brian Gutekunst's job, Gil.
Yeah, it's just our job to say when he screwed up, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly. And let's talk about, let's grade a little bit. Obviously, outside of Brian Gutekunst is a big reason why the Packers are 6-3 right now. Gil, on the offense, you and I, where we're going to grade, we're going to have our bye week grades coming up. On the offense, you and I are thinking the same thing. What letter grade did we give for the offense so far halfway through the year?
I had to go with a B for the offense at this point. I just, they've been solid. You look at the numbers look good.
Yes, they do.
Especially the rushing offense. They're averaging 5 yards a carry. Now, Malik Willis has some influence on that as well. Mm-hmm. But, the rushing offense is looking good. They're scoring points. They're picking up yards. And yet you just get the feeling they haven't put it all together yet. So, my grades tend to be a combination of expectations, potential, and performance. And so to me, the B is solid, but there's more. I think there's more there that they haven't really tapped into yet.
And that's exactly the grade I gave the Packers offense, Gil's, a B, because you look at the positives. They are a top 5 total offense. They're top 10 in passing offense, top 5 in rushing offense, top 10 in scoring. They're top 5 in rushing yards per carry. Their offensive line has only allowed 12 sacks this year. That's second fewest in the NFL. The passer rating, even though Jordan Love has a lot of interceptions this year, 94.1 in the year, that's 13th in the league. It's all really good numbers, but you look at the negatives too, where they're 20th in third down conversion percentage. They're the 6th most penalized offense in the NFL. They're tied for 5th most in giveaways this year. I mean, Love has 10 interceptions this year. That's tied with Geno Smith for most in the NFL so far this season. The red zone touchdown percentage as well. You talk about leaving a lot on the bone. Only 47.06% this year. That's 3rd worst percentage for touchdowns in the red zone in the NFL this year, where it's just a matter of Green Bay has been performing so well on offense, but they're just not finishing consistently enough, and it's been very sloppy. And that's why I think a B is a very, very solid grade, because the rankings have been really good, but there's just so much more left to be done.
Yeah, there is. And that red zone is so frustrating. And then when you add that to, you add Braden Narvison's struggles earlier in the year. Mm-hmm. So you would go down the field, get into the red zone or near the red zone, and come away completely empty if he missed a field goal. Now, hopefully McManus has solved that problem more or less for the Packers, but you want touchdowns. And if you're going to beat really good teams, you cannot leave points out on the field. And the penalties, the dropped passes, the red zone inefficiency, that has prevented the Packers from getting higher than a B in my book.
Now Love's completion percentage doesn't look great on the surface, but there's been a lot of drops. I think there's some metric where adjusted completion percentage, where his completion percentage should be much higher. But even on Sunday, I know he threw the pick 6 in that game on Sunday in the loss against Detroit, but there were so many balls that were really good. It's either the receivers ran the wrong route or guys were just dropping key passes on third down. Jordan Love, outside of that pick 6, actually played a pretty darn good game, in my opinion. From my vantage point, he actually played well. It was just very sloppy. Maybe the wet conditions had a factor, but it's just that just was kind of define the Packers right now in offense, where it's like they're very good, they're very much on their way. It seems they're miles ahead of where they were last year at this point, but there's still a lot left to go and a lot left to improve on.
They're this close to being an elite offense, and they're just not quite there. And one other thing, well, I'll save this comment. I'm going to mention it a little bit later.
All right. Well, sounds good. Well, Gil, how about the defensive side? What's your grade so far halfway through at the bye week on the defense?
I again, based on expectations, I'm a little bit more bullish on the defense than I am on the offense, just because they were struggling a lot more last year, and you have the new coordinator with Jeff Hafley. Things are changing. I went B+. It's not, it's a soft B+. It's kind of in between a B and a B+, because they're taking the ball away. I think that is a huge part of the defense.
It is.
The run defense is not consistent yet, but it's better than it was a year ago. And if they could just, again, so close, the pass rush needs to be more consistent. I just think, you look at the points given up, you look at the number of punts they're forcing, the number of turnovers they're getting. They're good, and they're that close to being really good.
And now, Matthew Tan, thank you for chiming in on YouTube in the comments section, everything like that. And if anyone watching, following along, feel free to chime in with your comments and your opinions on the Packers so far halfway through. I agree with Matthew Tan on the defense. I have them at a B. And Gil, you said you were kind of leaning B+, but you improved it and you were bullish on the B+. Hey, the positives there were they're 11th in total defense right now. The passing defense, it's been good, not great, but they've also missed Jair Alexander for a few games, including this past Sunday's game against Detroit and also the game against Minnesota. He's obviously a huge factor on that defense. 13th in passing defense this year, 10th in the rushing defense. That's a huge area of improvement for the Packers since the Joe Barry years, essentially. 13th in scoring defense. They have 19 takeaways this year. That leads the NFL. They had 18 total in all of 2023. They're tied for 4th in the NFL with 10 interceptions, tied for 1st with Indianapolis with 9 fumble recoveries. It's just a matter of, it just seems like also there's so much left to chew off the bone as well here on defense, where the opponent red zone touchdown percentage is just under 60%. They're 20th overall in the NFL. That obviously can improve, but obviously the opposer pass rating, they're 12th in the NFL. They're 16th in opposing completion percentage. They're tied for 6th in opposing rush yards per carry. They're 7th in third down defense. So there are areas where they've clearly improved, and they're clearly a better defense. The defense didn't lose them that game against Detroit on Sunday, by the way. The defense very much kept them in that game. Yeah. And it's just, this defense has improved, and this defense clearly seems bought in. Obviously, Preston Smith, I wouldn't say he didn't buy in. I think it was just a matter of like, hey, this scheme doesn't work for me. I got to move on. I got to move back to an old familiar scheme, which is totally fine. But the defense, I think, is totally bought in. I think right now they're a B, but I think this grade could easily go up, come week 18.
And, to me, the biggest thing that they need to work on, got to get pressure with your 4 guys rushing more often. It just makes such a difference. Quarterbacks make more mistakes when they're under pressure. I want to see more from Rashawn Gary. I want to see more from Kenny Clark in the interior. I want to see Kingsley Enagbare and Lucas Van Ness step up, and it doesn't have to be sacks, but just get consistent pressure, because right now we've had to resort to a lot of exotic blitzes in order to get pressure on the quarterback. I mean, how many teams blitz the slot corner? I mean, that's an unusual move for sure, but it's been effective when they've done it. If they can improve that area and be a little more consistent against the run, this defense goes from a B or B+ to an A- or even better.
It is still kind of crazy where it just seems like their pass rush obviously can improve like crazy. They have a lot of room for improvement, but they're still tied for 12th in the NFL in sacks right now. And it just seems like when Jeff Hafley's dialing up the pressure, it's been really good timing on that part. So now the special teams. Obviously, this is the ugliest unit so far as a collective overall this year. They have improved the last few weeks. But, Gil, what's your grade on the special teams halfway through?
Yeah, I got to go C-. It's been so frustrating. The penalties, the silly plays at times, when to field the punt. Jaden Reed and Keyshawn Nixon have both made mistakes in that area, or just yelling to your teammates when you're not going to field a punt and it's going to bounce.
That has driven me nuts.
This is special teams 101. We've seen some questionable snaps by the long snapper on more than a few occasions. And we talked a little bit about the Narvison struggles that we had. Daniel Whelan gets an A+. Everyone else, I mean, Daniel Whelan may very well be, I mean, I would give him Pro Bowl votes at this point,
Absolutely.
halfway through the season, with all the things that he's done, not just as a punter, but as a holder too, because he's saved a couple of iffy snaps that the Packers were still able to convert, including one of the game-winning kicks. But you need more consistency. I am disappointed with Rich Bisaccia. He was brought in to be sort of this special teams guru, and the consistency just hasn't been there. The unit top to bottom, just making boneheaded mistakes far too often.
Yeah, and I would have given a C- a few weeks ago, but right now I'm giving a C+. I'm still, it's still not a good grade. I mean, it's a little above average, but you got to be better than this if you're the Packers. And because remember, they got Rich Bisaccia a few years ago because of what happened against the 49ers at Lambeau Field, where special teams lost them that football game. I know Aaron Rodgers obviously didn't have his best game. The offense really stumbled and fell apart after the game's opening touchdown drive. But special teams, you have a punt block for a touchdown, you miss a field goal right before halftime. It's 10 points right there, where that was a big difference. And the Packers could have easily been a Super Bowl team that year if their special teams just had their crap together, pretty much. But C+ right now, where the Braden Narvison experience was an absolute mess. He was 12 of 17 in 6 games, kicking the ball before he was released. Missed a field goal in a 5-point loss in Brazil. He missed 2 field goals and a 2-point loss at Lambeau versus Minnesota. But Brandon McManus, he's been really good at kicking in the 3 games that we've had him. He's had 2 game winners in 3 weeks with the Packers. Now, he had that miss against the Lions on Sunday. Gil, we were talking before this episode where that's not really his fault. I was at the game at Lambeau on Sunday, and I was behind that goalpost, and the wind and the rain was blowing in hard at Brandon McManus. And the ball just kind of stopped. And I think that's the way it appeared on TV too. That wasn't a Brandon McManus issue. That was just a weather issue that, hey, it was just bad luck. It was bad timing, plain and simple. Packers kickers, they're 75% on field goals this year. Only the Jets have been worse overall in field goal percentage, but Brandon McManus has certainly helped that percentage out. They're perfect on extra points. That's obviously an area of improvement since Anders Carlson last year. But you mentioned Daniel Whelan, though, and he's the guy. He's the reason why the special teams grade is a C+ and not a D right now, because this guy has been so good punting the ball. He's 8th in net punt average. He has 13 punts inside the 20, 11 fair catch punts that have resulted in fair catches, only 11 returns on his punts. That's tied for 7th fewest in the NFL right now. Only 2 touchbacks. That's tied for 8th fewest. Opponents, they're gaining an average of 7 yards per return on Whelan punts. That's 5th fewest in the NFL. That's a big credit to Daniel Whelan being able to get that ball high in the air and having it hang in the air for so long and letting the punt coverage unit get down there in an efficient manner. Now, the return game, obviously, for the Packers, kicking and punting has been really poor, but Daniel Whelan he's been the saving grace in the special teams unit overall in general. He's going to be the Packers punter for a very long time because he's just been outstanding.
Yeah, he has been. And he, like I said, he gets an A+ to me, and I don't even want to talk about the rest of the unit's grade, but yeah, we just don't want to go there. I would give him a Pro Bowl vote. And when you also take into consideration that there are guys kicking in domes and in Florida and in LA, and he's kicking in Green Bay in the elements for 9 games this year. I give him even more credit than the raw numbers simply suggest.
Yeah, he's just been really good, and hopefully, and I think Brandon McManus has been really good. Again, weather was hopefully weather's not an issue at Lambeau later this year, but we'll wait and see. The guy kicked in Denver before, so the elements shouldn't really bother him, but sometimes you just can't help it when in certain conditions. Sometimes it's just too intense, even for the best kicker in the world, even for Justin Tucker's or Harrison Butker's or Brandon Aubrey's in general. Gil, now breaking it down real quick. Who was your first half offensive MVP? Spoiler alert, I share the same opinion as you, but I'm going to let you take the wheel right here.
I got to go with Josh Jacobs. He is on pace right now to gain more than 1,400 yards rushing. Yeah. He would be, if he stays on pace, he will be having the 3rd best rushing total in a single season of any Packer in history, only behind Amon Green and Jim Taylor, who did it in 14 games, which is hard to believe. But he has been durable. He can be a workhorse back, and that was the one knock I always had against Aaron Jones, who I really, really loved. But you couldn't give him the ball more than 15 times, handing off all that often, because he just didn't have the durability. Josh Jacobs has the durability. He can block okay. He can make catches out of the backfield. Finally ended that touchdownless streak, catching one the other week. But I just, his ability to run between the tackles and still be shifty and make people miss in a phone booth has impressed me time and time again.
Yeah, his durability has been awesome. And I loved Aaron Jones. I'm a big Aaron Jones fan still to this day, as long as he's not playing the Green Bay Packers. But Aaron Jones, the Packers wouldn't have won those games without Jordan Love with Aaron Jones. You just don't know if he would have been healthy enough. You don't know if he would have been able to carry the load like Josh Jacobs has. Josh Jacobs has been really good. He hasn't missed a game. And like you said, he's on pace for more than 1,400 rushing yards. He's having a terrific season. Even if you get notifications on your phone saying that he's been a below average running back this year, which is total crap, which is just, we're not going to get into that. But Josh Jacobs, he's definitely been the offensive MVP for the Green Bay Packers. They wouldn't be 6-3 if they didn't have Josh Jacobs. But Gil, on the defensive side, you and I agree here too, and I think it's pretty obvious. I think everybody. I don't think it'd be anyone else. But who's our defensive MVP?
The X-Man, Xavier McKinney, 6 interceptions, leading the league. Took the safety position, which last year was, to say they were average is being kind of generous, and this year it's just been a whole different story. This guy provides leadership. He's intelligent. He sees the field well. He's a ball hawk. Well, who was the last? I mean, Nick Collins, you have to go back to for the last real ball hawking safety.
Yeah.
The Packers had.
Nick Collins is the last true center fielder they had at safety. A guy where, if you notice, teams are not trying to throw down the middle of the field, deep down the middle, because Xavier McKinney, they know if he's back there, that ball ain't getting there. That plain and simple, that ball ain't getting there, and it's going to be picked off. It's going to be going the other way, or it's going to be broken up. He's been so good. And any time that teams are going deep on Xavier McKinney, it's along the sidelines, because guess what? It's either the sideline or their guys catching it most of the time. Yeah. So that's the kind of impact Xavier McKinney's had on this defense.
He really has been a difference maker. Look, think about this too. When you add it all up, our offensive MVP and our defensive MVP are both the 2 big signings that Brian Gutekunst made in free agency last year.
Yeah, and I just want to talk about Xavier McKinney real quick, Gil, because obviously I 100% agree with you where he has 6 interceptions in 9 games this year. That's tied for the NFL best interception mark with Detroit's Kirby Joseph. Has a fumble recovery, has a sack. He's credited with 7 of the Packers' 19 takeaways this year. And then obviously the 6 interceptions. Green Bay's entire defense had 7 interceptions in 2023. This guy he's not only going to be an all-pro and a Pro Bowler, this guy is in the running for Defensive Player of the Year just because of the crazy impact he's made on this defense, and just one of the better units at taking the ball away so far this season. And it's all because of Xavier McKinney, and he's just the ultimate chess piece and weapon to have back there. He has just been flat out awesome. I still can't believe the New York Giants let him and Saquon Barkley go, and I can't believe that we got him.
Well, look at where the New York Giants are in the standings, and that tells you everything you need to know. I am so glad we got the X-Man. He has been a great addition to the Packers. And, if he can even be as close to as good in the second half, we're in very good shape.
And Gil, we want to give some more credit to the Packers because, hey, 6-3, they've had a good year so far. It's been a very good season. They're right in the thick of the playoff race. But outside of Jacobs and McKinney, who's an honorable mention MVP that we should really give some praise to?
Yeah, for me, I kind of would categorize it more as the unsung hero rather than like honorable mention MVP. And it's got to be Malik Willis to me. I mean, here's a guy who was not even on the roster for 3 full weeks when he has to start a game, had started only 3 games in his NFL career prior, and proved that the situation wasn't too big for him. Yeah, they modified the game plan to fit his strengths, but that's what a coach is supposed to do.
Yep.
And Malik Willis, he hasn't thrown an interception, knock wood, all season. He ran, a completely different offense than what Jordan Love was running, and he ran it efficiently, effectively, dynamically. He's got good arm strength, and he made smart decisions. He is 3-0 in games where he had a major part in. That's the difference between 6-3 and 3-6 right there.
Yeah, he's 3-0 in games where he's played at least 2 or more snaps so far this year. The Packers are 3-0 in those games. He's just been incredible insurance, and he's a guy where obviously I love that the Packers have him as a backup right now, but some team may come knocking and be like, hey, we'll give you a 4th-round pick from Malik Willis. And if you're Brian Gutekunst, you may have to take that chance, but right now it's great insurance, especially with how dinged up Jordan Love has been. But my first half MVP, honorable mention MVP, it's the guy who brought Malik Willis in, and that is GM Brian Gutekunst. He has been so good with all these additions, with all these roster changes since the beginning of the offseason. We mentioned signing Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney, who have been probably the 2 best players on the Packers this year and just been incredible additions to this unit. Trading for Malik Willis at the end of training camp, where he clearly was not happy with the backup quarterback spot. And in years past where Ted Thompson, I loved him as a GM too. He was very good. May he rest in peace, but he didn't really address that backup quarterback position as well in his time in Green Bay because you just banked on Aaron Rodgers being healthy. And when Aaron Rodgers went down, the Packers, they were screwed for a reason because they didn't have good insurance there. And just being able to trade for a guy like Malik Willis where he wasn't going to get any time in Tennessee, and he's just been so good. And now you know that you have stability behind Jordan Love is awesome. We mentioned Chris Brooks earlier in the episode. What a solid, underrated signing at backup running back. He's been so great in pass protection. He's been the primary Packers running back in 3rd downs when it's passing situations. Yeah. And outside the critical drop on 3rd down, the opening drive against the Lions on Sunday, he's been reliable as a pass catcher out of the backfield too. And just a really smart player, a guy who they're going to have a hard time parting ways with because he's been so good there. And the rookie class, it's been impactful again with Jordan Morgan. He's been getting a lot of time. Javon Bullard's been solid at safety. Evan Williams, who may be the defensive MVP outside of Xavier McKinney, has been so good. Edrin Cooper, they're all playing a big part so far this year. And then now it's like, hey, will trading away Preston Smith be the right move where other guys can get a little more time? We'll see. But Brian Gutekunst, you got to give a lot of credit to the guy pushing all the buttons and who's made a lot of this happen. And it's said, and then also moving on to Brandon McManus and moving on from kicker at the right time too was absolutely a significant deal.
And even if you take a further step back and look at where the Packers were before the start of the 2023 season, new quarterback, you just traded away a future Hall of Famer, a 4-time MVP, youngest roster in the league, and they make the playoffs last year, and they're off to a 6-3 start this year despite the injuries. Yeah, but Gutekunst, very impressive job, and the last couple of draft classes have been solid as well.
There's no Executive of the Year award in the NFL, but Brian Gutekunst would very well be in the running this year for it because he's done just such great work the last few years in general. And being able to move on from a Hall of Fame quarterback to Jordan Love, pretty good. Pretty good for a GM in a really tough spot. Now, Gil, obviously we got 8 games left in the year. What's the Packers' greatest need to improve in the second half of the season? Mine's obvious. You and I usually think along the same wavelength, but I'm curious to hear what you think.
There's 2 things, one on each side of the ball, but I have got to go with the pass rush. I think if they can get the pass rush more consistent, the defense, the takeaways will even go up or at least stay very high. Yeah. And I think the defense just goes from, that BB plus level to darn, we're an elite defense. And you have an elite defense and an explosive offense. That's all you could ask for, right? I mean, that's what you need to contend. So I want to see that pass rush. To me, it's the linchpin on defense.
That's second on my list. First on my list is to clean up the turnovers because
that was second on my list.
And Jordan Love, he's leading the NFL in interceptions tied with Geno Smith right now. He's thrown an interception every game this year. He's got 10 INTs on the season. The Packers have 13 giveaways this year. That's tied for 5th most in the NFL. They're one of 8 teams with 13 or more giveaways so far this season. And Green Bay, hear me out, Gil, where this is why I think this is the greatest need to improve, because Green Bay is one of 3 teams with a winning record amongst those 8 teams. The other 2 being Denver and Minnesota. I think Denver's kind of played a weak schedule, so I think that's a big factor. But Minnesota's a good team. They don't turn it over. The Packers don't turn over they're going to be tough to beat, plain and simple. Take care of the football, and they are not going to be an easy team to beat. And also think about this too, where the Packers haven't attempted a field goal for more than 50 yards this season. And maybe part of it is they're going for it on 4th and shorts in that no man's land territory, or they're just straight up taking delay a game and punting the ball so then they can pin the opposing offense deep. But the offense can be so good and lethal, but they're simply not finishing drives. They're getting in their own way. And if they clean up the turnovers, this offense could just take even more bigger, giant steps. And they're top 10 in so many statistical categories. Just don't turn the ball over. Plain and simple. Don't turn the ball over. And I have a hard time believing that anyone can really stop this team.
Yeah. You know what? If both of those things happen, look out. I mean, then you're talking Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah. Big time. And it's a young, talented group. And hopefully we see them hit a stride like they did last year in the second half of the season. So I'm excited. When it's more fun when your team is in it. Plain and simple. You don't. You never, even last year when the Packers were 3-6, there were people rooting for the tank and rooting for just the tank for the number one pick. No, that's a loser's mentality. You got to always root for the win. Always root for your team to win. Plain and simple. And that's the Packers mentality. And I love it so much.
Yeah, me too. And I'm looking forward to the second half of the season.
Winning is fun, as they say in Bull Durham's. Like, man, winning's more fun than losing, man. You know, it's like, as Nuke LaLoosh said on the bus after winning so many times. But Gil, before we wrap up, articles that you have coming up on Cheesehead TV, the Packers Post. It's bye week, obviously, for the Packers, not a bye week for you. What do you got cooking online?
Well, for the Packers Post, I took a look at both the risks and the benefits of the Preston Smith trade, and I spelled them both out. There are both. And for Cheesehead TV, I took a look at the 6-3 start and whether it's a reason for optimism or concern.
That's interesting. Interesting talking points there. So, hey, tune into Gil stuff. Go read Gil stuff, Packers Post, and Cheesehead TV. Gil, you ready for some trivia?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, the Packers, Gil, their second-year tight end, Tucker Kraft, he was on my radar also for honorable mention MVP in 2024 so far. He leads all Packers with 5 total touchdowns this season. Now, he's already eclipsed his receiving yards and touchdown totals from his rookie season. He's just a few catches away from a new career high in receptions. It's been a long time, Gil, since the Packers had a tight end lead the team in receiving touchdowns. So, Gil, I ask you, when was the last time a tight end led the Packers in receiving touchdowns?
So you're not asking me who, you're asking me when.
When and who.
Okay.
So when and who. We'll throw it in there because that's more fun.
Okay. I think it's Bubba Franks is who. And I'm going to say 2001. So
incorrect on both parts. And this is a tough one. This is a really tough one. And I was kind of surprised looking back in the history books and the stats and everything to see who it was. It was 2015. It was Richard Rodgers. He had 8 receiving touchdowns in 2015. That was tied with James Jones atop the receiving touchdown leaderboard in Green Bay. Same year where former Packers great Jordy Nelson tore his ACL in Pittsburgh in a preseason contest. Rodgers was the third-round pick of the Packers in 2014, caught 120 passes for 1,166 yards and scored 13 total touchdowns in 4 seasons with the Packers. Rodgers last played for the LA Chargers in 2022. Now, Gil, that's not the most touchdowns, though, scored by a Packers tight end, though, in the last 10 seasons. Can you name the tight end with the most touchdown grabs since 2014?
Robert Tonyan.
Very good. Yeah, that should have been my question right there. But it was Robert Tonyan. He caught 11 touchdowns in 2020. That's the year that Devontae Adams led the team with a team record 18 scores that season. Just a historic season. Aaron Rodgers won the MVP as well. Matt LaFleur should have been coach of the year, but obviously didn't get it. Maybe he'll get it this year. But yeah, who would have thought Richard Rodgers was the last Packers tight end to lead the team in receiving touchdowns? 2015 was kind of a weird year.
Yeah, it was. It definitely was. But hey, more power to Richard Rodgers. I don't think too many people would have known that he tied for the team lead in touchdown catches that year.
Hey, that's the guy who caught the Hail Mary in Detroit.
That's right.
He had those big gloves and those big hands, and that ball just kind of vacuumed into his hands.
Rodgers to Rodgers.
Yeah, I love it. Does he have a vintage moment in him?
All right. Well, that is going to do it for us. We will be right back here next week, and we'll actually have a week 11 game you. Follow us on Twitter at Gil Packers and at GB Packers Sean to stay up to date on all things Packers or to ask us questions. Or you can email us at gbpackerssean@gmail.com. Make sure you're subscribed to Packers Talk on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Big thanks to PackersTalk.com for powering our show, and thank you for listening. Until next time, go Pack Go!
Go Pack Go!